Hey everyone, welcome back. Political recap here. Today I want to talk about something that caught my attention this week. Kamala Harris appeared at the Austrian World Summit in Vienna. She was speaking alongside global leaders about climate and democracy and international cooperation and America's role in the world. Now, on the surface, that's not necessarily breaking news. Former presidents, vice presidents, world leaders, these people attend these types of events all the time. But I think what people are actually reacting to wasn't the summit itself. It's seeing Kamala back on the major stage, because for a lot of Democrats, for progressives, honestly, myself, November 2024 was a painful, traumatic period in time. I'm still not fully healed from that. Not just politically, not emotionally, not just personally. People spent years believing the country was headed in one direction and then woke up to discover a very large portion of America saw things very differently. Whether you agreed with the outcome or not, it was one of those moments that forced people to stop and reassess where we are as a country. And now we're even deeper into that moment of reassessing. And, shortly after this election, where she lost, where we moved into this new era, Kamala Harris stepped out of the spotlight. She completely disappeared. Part of me, understands why she had to step back. Let's start with the human side of this. So imagine spending years as a vice president running for the highest office in the world. Imagine carrying the hopes and the expectations of millions of us and then losing. I know I would need time. I'd need distance. I would just be crushed. I was crushed and I wasn't even running. It was heartbreaking. I myself needed space to process what happened. And, I wasn't running for the highest office in the world. And so when people ask where Kamala has been, I think it's important to acknowledge that, first off, she's a human being. I understand why she stepped back. I understand why she may have needed time away from the spotlight. That's a completely understandable reaction. But I also can't help but wonder at the same time, I can't help but ask, what if she hadn't? What if she had done what Trump had done after losing the election? Think about that for a moment. Trump lost. Many people said he was finished. I remember that period where everyone was like, oh, Trump, he's done, never going to be back. But he didn't disappear. He doubled down. He held rallies, gave interviews, stayed in the news. He really remained engaged with his supporters and never stopped communicating. There's something to that. Politics didn't stop him when the elections ended. In many ways, the next campaign started that very next day, and 4 years later, he's back in the White House. Politics don't pause. One thing Republicans have become very effective at is that understanding that politics is not an event. It's a constant conversation. It's a movement. It's a relationship with voters. Democrats have often treated elections as major milestones with long periods of regrouping in between, and that needs to shift. Politics needs to be a permanent effort. Again, it's a generalization, but I think it's one worth thinking about because momentum matters, visibility matters, communication matters. And if you leave a vacuum, someone else fills it every single time. And that's why seeing Kamala Harris at this summit sparked a lot of discussion, not because she announced a campaign, not because she unveiled something, but because people were reminded of what it looks like when someone is actively engaged in this conversation that we're living. Maybe sometimes I think maybe I'm asking the wrong question, because The bigger question isn't where has Kamala been, but it's where have we been as citizens, as voters, as community members, as Americans? Democracy was never supposed to be a spectator sport. I know for myself personally, I was very late getting into politics. Somewhere along the way, politics sort of became entertainment where we watch, we react, we complain, but participation requires more than observation. It requires action. It requires showing up, paying attention, holding leaders accountable and really engaging, having the conversations, voting, not just during presidential elections, but during local elections, during school board elections, during city council elections, state elections, the places where many of the decisions affecting our daily lives are actually made. We need to demand better. And part of showing up means being willing to challenge our own side. It means demanding better from leaders that we support. It means refusing to give anyone a free pass. One frustration I hear constantly from people across the political spectrum is that there's too much influence of money in politics. And I know we're seeing this more and more. People are tired of feeling like wealthy donors or special interests or corporations or lobbying groups. They have more influence than ordinary citizens. Both parties have become way too dependent on large donors, on entrenched interests. And whether we're talking about corporate influence or defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, Wall Street, tech, labor, the concern is often the same. Are elected officials listening to the people who elected them? Or are they listening primarily to the people funding them? Because I definitely don't think it's the first. There should be these questions being asked. A healthy democracy requires scrutiny. A healthy democracy requires citizens who are willing to question power, even when it's power they generally agree with. America is not beyond repair. The good news is that America has faced difficult moments like this before. Periods of division, uncertainty, periods where we genuinely worried about the future. And we've managed to keep moving things forward. Not because politicians solved everything, not because one election fixed everything, but because ordinary people engaged, because citizens united, we participated. We refuse to give up on the idea that the country can improve. And that is one of the shining examples of why America is so great, because we do not give up. We make change happen, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. People organizing, people voting, people advocating, refusing to become cynical, even in these very hard times, refusing to check out. When people talk about turning the ship around, they're often looking for a single leader, a single election, a single movement. But history doesn't often work that way. Real change happens when millions of us decide to become participants instead of spectators. It happens when we decide that democracy is something that we'd rather have than something we'd want to watch. It happens when we stop waiting for someone else to fix things and we start asking, what role can I play? The goal isn't uniformity. The goal is engagement. It's participation. So yes, Kamala Harris returning to a major global stage this week is noteworthy. And yes, to be fair, one might wonder what would have happened if she remained more visible after 2024. But the larger lesson here isn't about Kamala Harris at all. It's about us. Let's continue standing up. Let's continue participating. We deserve to move forward with progress, united. So please continue to follow, continue to like. Let's keep breaking down the stories that make up America today, and I will see you next time.